In the past few months, federal inspectors have issued one shocking recall after another, pulling contaminated cans from the very shelves millions of Americans rely on. Wood fragments in stew, mercury levels spiking far beyond safety limits, lids breaking that could unleash deadly botulism. The danger is no longer hypothetical. It is here, it is now, and it could be sitting inside your pantry. Ask yourself this: what if the can you trust to stretch your Social Security check is the same can that silently poisons your family? What if the bargain you thought you grabbed at Walmart or Costco is nothing more than a Trojan horse, hiding splinters, toxins, and corporate lies? These are not accidents. They are patterns, repeated across brands that have already paid millions in fines for cheating consumers, and yet their products still line the aisles, waiting for the next unsuspecting shopper. This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. Stay with us as we reveal the 6 canned foods you must stop stocking right now, because in each case, beyond the shocking recalls lies an even darker story. Don't panic, don't rage just yet, because at the end of each part, we'll also show you safe, trustworthy alternatives. Number 1. Genova Tuna. The shock came in February of this very year when Tri-Union Seafoods, the U.S. wing of the global Thai Union empire, abruptly pulled multiple lots of Genova, Van Camp's, H-E-B, and Trader Joe's canned tuna from store shelves. The reason? A design flaw in the easy-open lids that could silently let botulism bacteria seep in. Botulism is not some minor upset stomach. It is a paralyzer, a silent killer that can shut down breathing in hours. The FDA labeled the move a Class 2 recall, meaning the danger was severe enough to cause life-threatening illness, but subtle enough to trick families into thinking everything was fine. Picture the nightmare: a grandmother in Ohio carefully stacking cans for winter, unaware that one pull of a tab might poison the very household she's trying to protect. When even Costco, Walmart, Publix, Kroger, and Safeway all carried these cans, it meant the threat was not a corner case. It was everywhere. And yet the recall is just the curtain pulled back a few inches. Behind it lies a theater of greed and negligence that has been rehearsed for years. Tri-Union, tied to Chicken of the Sea, was once caught fixing tuna prices with Bumblebee and Starkist. That wasn't competition, it was collusion, a rigged game where families clipped coupons only to learn the companies had already emptied their pockets behind closed doors. For older Americans already juggling rising utility bills and medical costs, that betrayal felt like being robbed twice, once at the checkout line and once at the dinner table. Then there are the repeated safety lapses. Thousands of cans were recalled after under-processing failures that risked scombroid poisoning, headaches, rashes, and heart pounding. Anxiety attacks unleashed not by a virus but by a careless factory floor. It is like buying a fire extinguisher only to discover it explodes when you squeeze the handle. Who calls that premium? Not the retirees left clutching their chests in hospital corridors. Mercury adds another ugly layer. Independent tests have found elevated levels in albacore and yellowfin varieties, turning what was once marketed as gourmet protein into a slow drip of neurotoxin. Mercury doesn't knock on the door. It sneaks in through sandwiches and casseroles, leaving hands shakier, memories foggier, and hearts weaker. For seniors already living with fragile health, it is the cruelest twist. The comfort food you thought was saving you money may be slowly stealing your strength. And the cost isn't only borne in American kitchens. Investigations into Thai Union's fleets have exposed migrant workers trapped at sea, starved, beaten, and stripped of their passports. Some called it what it is: slavery on the water. Every can of Genova carries not just fish and olive oil, but the hidden cries of men who may never see shore again. It's a bitter reminder that what looks cheap at checkout often comes with a hidden bill written in blood. So what is the way forward? Nobody wants to gamble with poison in their pantry or cruelty in their conscience. The simplest answer is to walk away from brands like Genova, Van Camp's, and Chicken of the Sea, and steer toward alternatives that have earned better reputations. Many Americans are already swapping shelves for Wild Planet, Safe Catch, and even Bumblebee's newer, responsibly caught lines that must now meet stricter oversight. Some are moving away from tuna altogether, choosing sustainably packed salmon from brands like Crown Prince or even Costco's own Kirkland Wild Alaskan Sockeye, which testing has often shown to be cleaner. The point is not to panic, but to pivot. Take the power back from the corporations laughing in boardrooms and put it into your own hands. Because at the end of the day, that can in your cupboard is not just food. It is a vote, a choice, and sometimes a loaded gun. Number 2. Bumblebee. The headlines in March shook the seafood world. Bumblebee Foods, the brand so many Americans grew up trusting for its classic tuna, now stands accused of benefiting from forced labor and shocking human abuse on foreign fishing vessels. A lawsuit filed in California paints a horrific picture. Indonesian fishermen working under torture-like conditions, denied medical care, their bodies literally broken while the company kept the tuna flowing into U.S. supermarkets. One man was burned so badly he could barely move, yet was forced to keep working. Another's leg was ripped open down to the bone, and still he was ordered to haul nets. If true, this isn't just corporate negligence, it's a crime against human decency, and it may even violate American anti-trafficking laws. The thought that a can of tuna at Walmart or Kroger might carry the suffering of men enslaved at sea is enough to make any shopper's stomach turn. But this fresh lawsuit is only the latest scar in Bumblebee's long record of betrayals. The brand was already notorious for colluding with Chicken of the Sea and StarKist to jack up tuna prices in the infamous price-fixing scandal. For working Americans told to buy tuna, it's cheap protein, it turned out the companies had fixed the price of even that. It's like watching the gas station rig the pump while you're running on fumes. Insult added to injury. The Justice Department forced guilty pleas, fines, and settlements, but by the time the dust settled, Bumblebee was drowning in debt and eventually filed for bankruptcy, later being scooped up by a Taiwanese fishing conglomerate. Consumers didn't get justice. They just got a new owner overseas. Food safety failures make the picture even darker. Under Bumblebee's ownership, a subsidiary pumped out canned chili sauce so badly processed it sparked a botulism outbreak. People landed in hospitals, and investigators found broken alarms, leaky valves, and sloppy temperature controls in the plant. The facility was ultimately shut down, but the damage was done. The company had gambled with lives by cutting corners. For older Americans with fragile health, that's not a mistake. It's Russian roulette dressed up as dinner. Greenpeace and U.S. Customs have both flagged vessels linked to Bumblebee's supply chain for credible forced labor evidence. And yet, Bumblebee-branded tuna from those same boats still turned up on American shelves years later. It is the kind of corporate shrug that says, "We'll keep selling, you keep buying, and let's not talk about what happens in between." That isn't just cynical, it's cruel. Add to this the environmental hypocrisy. Flashy wild selections labels promising sustainability while sourcing from fleets accused of destructive fishing. For seniors who thought they were making a responsible choice, it's a classic bait and switch, the kind politicians and corporations have been running for decades. So what does this mean for shoppers today? It means that the Bumblebee in your cupboard is more than just fish in a can. It represents cartel-level greed, shattered worker rights, botulism in factory lines, and the quiet poisoning of trust. And yet the shelves are not empty. There are alternatives. Brands like Wild Planet, Safe Catch, and even smaller labels such as American Tuna or Crown Prince offer options with stronger transparency. Some shoppers have pivoted to wild-caught salmon from Kirkland or sustainably sourced sardines from King Oscar, finding cleaner, safer proteins that don't carry the same stench of scandal. Because at the end of the day, a can of tuna is not just a budget choice. It is a moral choice, a health choice, and sometimes the difference between feeding your family or feeding the machine, that exploits them. Number 3. Chicken of the Sea. In February of this year, the Smiling Mermaid on Chicken of the Sea cans turned into a silent warning label. The company was forced to recall 5-ounce cans of chunk white albacore tuna in water after inspectors found that the lids failed to meet seam standards. Tiny defects that could compromise the seal and allow contamination to slip in unnoticed. No illnesses had yet been reported, but the danger was real enough that retailers from Walmart to Safeway pulled the cans off shelves, urging customers to return or destroy them. For an older shopper trying to stretch retirement dollars, this meant that even the simplest protein, tuna in water, could morph overnight into a potential threat lurking in the pantry. That easy lunch suddenly looked more like a game of chance, but food safety slip-ups are just one layer of the story. Chicken of the Sea's parent, Tri-Union Seafoods, is a key part of the Thai Union Group, a global giant with its fingerprints all over the tuna industry. Not long ago, it found itself caught in one of the largest price-fixing scandals in U.S. food history. Alongside Bumblebee and StarKist, executives colluded to inflate the cost of tuna across the country. Families thought they were making the thrifty choice, swapping steak for tuna sandwiches, only to find the prices secretly rigged by a cartel in suits. Bumblebee and Starkist pleaded guilty, paid millions in fines, and were dragged through court. Chicken of the Sea avoided criminal charges by becoming the whistleblower, but it wasn't innocent. It still had to pay tens of millions in civil settlements. Shoppers were left holding the bill while the companies laughed in boardrooms. The deception runs deeper still. Advocacy groups and investigative journalists have documented horrific labor conditions in supply chains feeding Thai union brands, including Chicken of the Sea. Migrant workers describe 20-hour shifts on distant water fleets, beatings from supervisors, and debt bondage that chain them to ships with no way out. Some accounts speak of men disappearing at sea, their names lost but their labor still padding corporate profits. That means each neat stack of Chicken of the Sea cans at Costco or Kroger hides an ugly truth. What seems like a bargain for American consumers often comes at the price of someone else's blood and freedom thousands of miles away. The irony is that Chicken of the Sea has spent years branding itself as sustainable and responsible, even slapping dolphin-safe logos on cans. Yet watchdogs accuse the company of greenwashing, pointing to destructive fishing practices still tied to its suppliers. For consumers who tried to make ethical choices, these promises collapse like cheap tin. Seniors who already lived through decades of political spin and corporate lies know exactly what it feels like to be sold hope in glossy packaging, while the truth festers underneath. For older Americans balancing Social Security checks against rent, groceries, and healthcare, the betrayal feels brutal. They trusted tuna as the one protein they could count on. Affordable, safe, simple. Instead, they've been handed a product touched by price-rigging cartels, defective packaging that threatens their health, supply chains stained with labor abuse, and false environmental claims designed to soothe guilt. The mermaid logo that once promised comfort now looks more like a smirk, a reminder that the corporations know consumers will keep buying no matter how rotten the reality. And yet no one has to stay trapped. Many have turned away from Chicken of the Sea, Bumblebee, and Starkist altogether, choosing instead alternatives like Wild Planet, Safe Catch, or even American Tuna, brands with stricter sourcing standards and clearer transparency. Others pivot to salmon from Crown Prince or Kirkland's Wild Alaskan Sockeye, or sardines from King Oscar, which offer affordable protein without the trail of scandal. For families tired of being played, these choices are more than groceries. They are small acts of rebellion, cutting off the flow of dollars to corporations that treat health, workers, and truth as expendable. Because at the end of the day, what sits in your cupboard should be food, not a fraud dressed in a can. Number 4. Starkist. Charlie the tuna may look like a harmless cartoon fish, but in February of this year, shoppers were reminded again that Starkist's smiling mascot masks decades of scandals that still cast a shadow over its bright yellow and blue cans. While no new recall has been announced in 2025, the brand remains chained to its long history of price manipulation, food safety fiascos, and consumer deception. Problems that don't just fade away because time has passed. For older Americans who thought grabbing a can of Starkist was the cheapest, safest way to get protein, the real story feels less like comfort food and more like corporate betrayal wrapped in tin. Start with the infamous Tunagate scandal that Canadians still whisper about. Over 1 million cans of spoiled tuna, declared unfit for human consumption, were allowed to hit store shelves after political pressure overruled inspectors. The result? Mass outrage, a shuttered plant, 400 jobs lost, and the resignation of a cabinet minister. Families discovered that even government watchdogs could be muzzled while corporations pushed rotten fish into kitchens. For seniors who grew up believing that regulators were guardians of public safety, Tunagate was a rude awakening. Proof that when profit is on the line, even the rules can be bent until they snap. Fast forward to the United States, where Starkist became one of the central villains in the nationwide tuna price-fixing scandal. Prosecutors revealed that executives colluded with Bumblebee and Chicken of the Sea to secretly inflate prices, robbing millions of shoppers of hard-earned dollars. Starkist ultimately agreed to massive settlements, including a staggering $130 million as part of a $200 million class action resolution. That wasn't business as usual. That was an admission that every consoled during those years came with an invisible tax levied by a cartel. For retirees counting Social Security checks down to the penny, this wasn't abstract. It was theft dressed up as dinner. And then there's the underfilling scandal. Consumers sued after discovering that 5-ounce Star-Kissed cans consistently contained less tuna than advertised. It sounds like a bad joke. Selling air at the price of fish, but courts agreed the claims were serious enough to demand payouts in cash and coupons. Older Americans already know the feeling of shrinking packages at rising prices, but in this case, the can itself was literally lighter than promised. Even beyond fraud and recalls, the health concerns are sobering. Advocacy groups have repeatedly flagged albacore tuna, Star-Kissed's proud offering, for worrisome levels of methylmercury. The FDA quietly advises limiting intake for pregnant women and children, but nowhere on the cheery Star-Kissed packaging will you see that warning spelled out. Instead, older shoppers are sold an image of heart-healthy protein, while mercury accumulates in their bodies, clouding memories, weakening hearts, and worsening tremors. For families already juggling prescriptions and hospital visits, the idea that a tuna sandwich might accelerate decline feels like being ambushed by the very meal meant to sustain you. The moral rot spreads further into the supply chain. Investigations into global fishing practices have revealed workers trapped in debt bondage, beaten, starved, and forced to endure endless shifts on distant water vessels supplying tuna to brands like Star-Kissed. Meanwhile, the company advertises dolphin-safe and sustainable sourcing, claims that advocacy groups and lawsuits argue are misleading since destructive fishing practices and bycatch of marine life continue. For consumers who thought they were choosing responsibly, it feels like a cruel hoax. A company bragging about protecting dolphins while turning a blind eye to suffering both human and animal. For older Americans on fixed incomes, the betrayal is layered. Star-Kissed was supposed to be the pantry staple that made ends meet. Instead, it became a case study in how corporations pocket profits while families swallow risks. Price fixing, spoiled shipments, underfilled cans, mercury contamination, slave labor on the seas, and hollow environmental promises, all hidden behind a cartoon fish cracking jokes. That can of tuna isn't the safe bargain it pretends to be. It's a Trojan horse wheeled into your kitchen, carrying poison, exploitation, and lies under the lid. Number 5. Grand Union Tuna. Back in the day, shoppers thought private label tuna was the ultimate budget hack. The plain can promised that you could feed a family without emptying your wallet. But in reality, Grand Union's house brand tuna became a headline case for how cheap often comes at the highest price. In 1970, federal inspectors uncovered more than 1 million pounds of Grand Union tuna with mercury levels soaring above the so-called safe limit. The FDA ordered unsold cans pulled from circulation, admitting that the mercury far exceeded half a part per million. For older Americans who relied on tuna as the protein that wouldn't break the bank, the news landed like a thunderclap. Every sandwich, every casserole might have been laced with a neurotoxin that doesn't fade away but lodges in the body for years. Picture signing a pension check with a trembling hand, not from age but from mercury, slipping silently into your system through a 99-cent can. That's not thrift. That's treachery in your pantry, but the mercury scare was only the beginning. Grand Union, like many supermarket chains of its era, built power by leaning hard on suppliers and pushing private labels that undercut competition. Whispers of antitrust investigations swirled, with critics accusing the chain of muscling smaller players out of the market. It wasn't just about cheap tuna. It was about a business model that treated both fishermen and rival grocers as pawns on a chessboard, rigged for corporate gain. For working-class Americans who had spent lifetimes fighting for union wages and fair play, the irony stung. A company called Grand Union profited by squeezing those who had no union protection at all. And then came the wider realization: Grand Union's tuna scare wasn't a one-off. It became a symbol of how private label cans sold under the guise of local trust were often supplied by the same global conglomerates already infamous for scandals. Reports tied house brand tuna across U.S. shelves back to the very same web of conglomerates like Tri-Union and Thai Union, the players entangled in price fixing and forced labor allegations. Buying store brand tuna didn't mean escaping corruption. It meant paying into the same machinery with a different sticker slapped on the lid. It's like swapping seats on the Titanic. The iceberg doesn't care whose name is painted on the hull. The darker truth lay in the labor behind those cans. Accounts from distant water fleets described workers tricked onto boats, passports seized, and lives swallowed by endless days of 20-hour shifts. Men were beaten, starved, or left unpaid, while some simply vanished into the sea. Every time an American retiree opened a can of cheap Grand Union tuna, they were unknowingly tapping into a system that wrung discounts from the broken bodies of invisible men thousands of miles away. For those who had once walked picket lines to defend worker rights at home, the hypocrisy was unbearable. The so-called Grand Union was built on the absence of any real union at all. Add to that the ever-present shadow of botulism recalls tied to underprocessing and supermarket tuna, and the can became a roulette wheel. A quick lunch could easily turn into muscle paralysis and respiratory collapse. For older Americans juggling health conditions, the risk wasn't theoretical. It was a gamble between nourishment and a hospital bed. Grand Union no longer exists as a supermarket empire, but its legacy lives on as a cautionary tale. Its name echoes in food safety debates every time mercury levels in tuna are questioned or labor abuses in fishing fleets come to light. For retirees trying to stretch every dollar, the lesson still bites. That so-called bargain can is never just dinner. It can be toxic metal in disguise, labor abuse wrapped in tin, and betrayal sold with a smile. Number 6. Dinty Moore Stew. The shockwave hit in late May of this year when Hormel Foods Corporation yanked more than 256,000 pounds of its Dinty Moore beef stew from store shelves after 3 separate consumers reported finding shards of wood floating in their cans. A Class Y recall, the most severe category, was issued, meaning the USDA deemed the risk so serious that even a single bite could cause injury. The affected cans, marked with establishment number EST199G and a best by February 2028 date, had already spread nationwide, stacked high in Walmart, Costco, and corner grocery stores alike. For older Americans stretching every dollar, this was a gut punch. A trusted comfort food now exposed as a stew pot of splinters, sold under the false promise of safety. But the wood scandal is just the latest ingredient in Hormel's long, bitter recipe of controversy. Step back in time and you see a company scarred by labor wars, like the strike in Minnesota where workers fought nearly a year against wage cuts of almost 1/4. Families rallied, boycotted, and still watched livelihoods crumble, proof that Hormel's loyalty was never to the people on the line, but to the numbers on a balance sheet. For retirees who once punched factory clocks, the memory cuts deep. Dinty Moore may look like a working man's meal, but the corporation behind it broke workers' backs to keep profits hearty. Animal welfare scandals have added their own foul flavor. Undercover footage revealed pigs beaten, packed into filthy pens, and slaughtered in grotesque ways at supplier facilities tied to Hormel. The company responded with firings and new audits, but the footage lingers like a rotten aftertaste. Each can of Dinty Moore isn't just beef and potatoes. It's a moral debt written in suffering, disguised under a ladle of gravy. For seniors who remember family dinners as a symbol of care and decency, realizing their stew is tied to cruelty feels like betrayal ladled hot onto their plates. The health risks are another betrayal hiding in plain sight. Nutritionists have long slammed Dinty Moore beef stew for its salt content, with a single can serving up more than 1,000 milligrams of sodium, almost half of a day's maximum allowance, alongside saturated fat and preservatives. For retirees already battling high blood pressure, heart disease, or kidney strain, this isn't nourishment but sabotage. It's like being sold a lifeboat with holes punched in the bottom. It may look sturdy, but the longer you stay in, the faster you sink. And then there are the broader ethical shadows. Hormel has faced criticism for squeezing farmers, lobbying against clearer labeling laws, and cutting corners on oversight. Reports from inside meatpacking plants describe immigrant workers forced into freezing rooms at breakneck speeds, suffering amputations, chemical burns, and constant injuries. To call Dinty Moore a hearty stew while workers are chewed up in the process is the cruelest irony, a joke at the expense of both consumers and the very people who make the food. For older Americans shopping on fixed incomes, Dinty Moore isn't the safe, nostalgic staple it pretends to be. It is a pressure cooker of dangers. Wood fragments in cans, animal cruelty in supply chains, sodium spiking blood pressure, and factories that grind down human lives. The brand's commercials may flash lumberjack mascots and hearty slogans, but the reality is less about nourishment and more about corporate greed spooned straight into the pantry. A can that should have symbolized strength and value has instead become a warning. Sometimes what looks like stew is really just betrayal simmered and sealed, waiting for the next family to open it. When trusted cans hide betrayal, only awareness protects us. Subscribe now and let's expose the truth they desperately bury.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our daily content. Now feel free to check out some of the newest and best videos currently showing on your screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.